pride myself with.
Or the nature of prejudice. But new tools can take these areas traditionally studied at the molar level down to the micro level. Mahzarin Banaji of Yale has uncovered how our unconscious attitudes can show up as activity deep within the brain. She began with a reaction time test, the IAT, to measure how quickly we pair our positive and negative values to unfamiliar black and white faces.
The IAT measures the strength of association between two concepts. You can imagine how quickly can one pair words like love, joy, peace, things that mean good things, with the category African American, the category European American. The speed with which the two can be connected is an indirect measure of one's level of prejudice towards the group.
These unconscious high-speed connections can reveal a bias quite different from our conscious beliefs. Banaji has captured thousands of IAT responses. They have yielded some expected and unexpected results.
White Americans show what we might call an in-group preference. That is, they show a swiftness to associate white with good and black with bad. African Americans show an interesting pattern. On average, they show no bias. About half the African Americans who take this test are showing a pro-black preference. That is, they're faster to associate black with good than white with good. But the other half are showing quite the opposite. They're showing a fast association between white and good, even though they're black.
If a negative value for black can overpower our conscious attitudes, it should be visible deep within the brain, in its emotional center, the amygdala. With functional magnetic resonance imaging, scientists can observe how the amygdala is activated when we see emotional or fearful stimuli. Neuroscientist Liz Phelps worked with Banaji to compare the IAT data to amygdala activity.
When you learn something in the environment, fearful or negative, the amygdala will become involved. So we would expect, if the amygdala is important in emotional learning and memory in general, that it would also be important in learning about the evaluation of social groups and the emotional properties that we assign to social groups.
As in the IAT, subjects viewed unfamiliar black and white faces. Those who showed strong amygdala activation to black faces also showed a high preference for white on the IAT.
The big question, of course, remains as to what it is these measures predict. Does a person who has a high race bias measure on the IAT, is that person also likely to perform behaviors in the real world that would reveal higher degrees of prejudice? Does it matter if a police officer has a large IAT score? Is such a police officer more likely to shoot at somebody who is black than somebody who is white? These are not experiments that have been done, but this is indeed where the field is going. It is for the next few decades to discover.
So now you have an idea of the three levels at which psychologists work. There's the micro, the molecular, and the molar, which to many sound a lot more like the physical sciences than psychology. But that's no accident. Psychology is a science. It has the methodology of a science, the principles, the practices, and procedures that yield conclusions based on data, on research-generated evidence. Psychology also has its own historical context in which it must be understood, just as all of us have. Modern psychology began in 1879 when Wilhelm Wundt founded the first experimental psychology laboratory in Germany. Wundt trained many young researchers who carried on the tradition of measuring reactions to experimental tasks, such as reaction times to sensory stimuli, attention, judgment, and word associations. The first American psychological laboratory like Wundt's was founded at the Johns Hopkins University in 1883 by G. Stanley Hall. Hall, the first president of the American Psychological Association, introduced Sigmund Freud to the American public by translating Freud's General Introduction to Psychoanalysis. But 1890 may stand as the most significant date in psychology's youth. That's when William James published what many consider to be the most important psychological text of all time, Principles of Psychology. James was a professor of psychology at Harvard University, where he also studied medicine and taught physiology. James was interested in all the ways in which people interact with and adapt to their environment. And so he found a place in psychology for human consciousness, emotions, the self, personal values, and religion. But the Wundtian psychologists, like G. Stanley Hall, rejected James's ideas as unscientific and soft. They argued that psychology should be patterned after the model of the physical sciences. So they focused their study on topics like sensation and perception, on psychophysics, measuring mental reactions to physical stimuli. Later, they added investigations of how animals acquire conditioned responses and how humans memorize new information. These differences among psychologists in what should be studied and how one should go about it are still with us a century later. In the programs ahead, we'll need to adopt multiple perspectives, to be open to a range of theories, and to use a variety of research approaches, given the complexity of our subject matter, the brain, mind, and behavior. In our next program, we're going to see how psychologists conduct their research. If that sounds boring, think again. Psychology is so much a part of our everyday lives that all of us can benefit from understanding that what we know about human nature depends on how we know it. So join us next time and become a more sophisticated consumer of research that purports to tell us about ourselves. For Discovering Psychology, I'm Philip Zimbardo.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching. For information about this and other Annenberg CPB programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org. To learn more about the Annenberg CPB Channel series and workshops for teachers, how to take them for credit, how to buy them on video cassette, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org/channel.